I'm Tom Curran, co CEO and founder of Curran Wealth Management. These last few weeks, with increased anxiety in the market and signs that many investors are very, very concerned about the market, to include selling and getting out of the market because it's different this time. Well, I don't want to sound cavalier, but it's always different this time, especially at points when people feel compelled to sell to protect their assets, to get out before the end comes. And it always seems to make sense, but in the long run, it never makes sense. Number one, this is not a new phenomenon. It's something that we've been living with, at least in my career, which began in the period in 1969. That's a long time. That's a lot of years, and a lot of crises in the market, a lot of sell offs, some with no apparent reason. And some of them occurred years after, and we're still trying to figure it out. But more recently, we had the pandemic and the sudden bear market that came on us. And during that bear market, I was frequently asked, well, how are we ever going to get out of this? The market's collapsing because the economy has been shut down. And on the one hand, I couldn't have agreed more, and I absolutely agreed with that. It appeared that the world had shut down and the economic forces were shut down. And from that, we could come to a lot of conclusions, which the market did reflect early on. But after reflection and after the solutions that the US put into place, the market made a dramatic turn. And as you may recall, it was approximately a 2 or 3 month bear market. It wasn't so much the length of the bear market that strikes me, it was actually the fact that in a period when I could see absolutely no solution, and where most people I spoke to could see no solution, there was one. Not only did the stock market do unbelievably well in spite of all the problems, real estate did very well with it. So, yeah, it was different that time too. But the result that time and the time before it and the time before it and so forth and so on, while different this time, at least partly different, the result was always the same. And that is long term investors were rewarded. Early in my life, I said what I've just told you. That is, I would say the key to success and securing our financial security was to buy good companies and hold them for the long term. But in my earlier years, I found two things happened. There always seemed to be a reason why I should sell. Some bill I had that needed to be paid. There was always a reason. On top of that, my outlook for the market was not very good. So I said to myself, in spite of my long term philosophy, which I finally began to execute in the 1990s, um, it was going to be put on pause and I would get around to it later. I would frequently rationalize it the way so many do today. Well, I'll get out and I'll get back in. And I've heard that so many times from other people, but it never seems to work out that way. It never does. So, sometime in the 1990s, I actually started to practice what I was preaching. And now um, I would say that I'm always 100% invested, not entirely in stocks. I have holdings in real estate, but I have very little cash. I'm mostly invested. And I'm not for a moment suggesting that you follow the same pattern that I have followed. since the 1990s, but I am suggesting to you that will you back off from the notion that you're going to sell and buy back at better prices or when things get clearer. Every time I hear that said, well, I'll wait until the market gets more certain and the clouds go away and then we'll invest. Well, we always say the same thing to that. By then, it'll be far too late. The market discounts the future. And when things seem really rosy and better, the market will have risen quite a bit. So, one of the tough parts about getting back in is the market frequently turns upward when things seem bleakest. If we turn to our rational selves and we look at any long term chart, we find that stocks have performed very well. They've provided more than 10% returns annualized for many, many years. If you go back to um, 1945, for example, and take rolling 20-year periods, the market has appreciated a minimum of 11% in every single one of those rolling periods. But in spite of that, people still don't achieve what they could if they were invested in stocks. It's one of those things that we allow our emotions to carry us away and not do what history has shown us would have made us a whole lot wealthier, a whole lot more secure if we simply did what history tells us. I recently mentioned in a blast I've done, an email blast, that in a recent discussion with students from RPI, I talked about emotional intelligence. It's a reference I made to my book, Investing Ahead. Emotional intelligence is critically important in everything we do. I like to say that if we don't have adequate, sufficient emotional intelligence, it compromises our intelligence. It makes us unable to think. In saying that, the students were absolutely taken up with that. In the aftermath of that discussion, that lecture, each of the students was asked to prepare a critique of my presentation. I was asked by the coordinator of the program if I wanted to see them, and I reluctantly did say yes, I'd like to see them. I'm glad I did. I was a little concerned that maybe they wouldn't be very flattering, but they happened to be. But the one thing that really stood out is that so many of the responses talked about emotional intelligence. The, the students recognize that they have to get smarter about the way they allow events they do not control influence their lives. They understand that they need to get a better control of how they react to the stress of being a student or the stress of daily life. And that I thought was really an amazing insight that it's a recognized issue. I was really surprised. I was absolutely really shocked that there was so much interest in it. I told them, or I asked them, have you ever tried to think and cry at the same time? Have you ever tried to be angry and think at the same time? But more importantly, stress is a hidden eroder of emotional intelligence. How does someone think effectively when they're allowing stress to overcome their lives? Are they going to make the best possible decisions? And I think the answer is obviously no. At least those students seem to agree. The daily press, the social media, all the things we hear and listen and read, so many of them are eroding our ability to think. If we think and look at the long term results of the market and accept the fact that there will be short term volatility, our lives become so much better. Why do we get an education? We get education and we go to college. Why? To have a better lifestyle. Well, what good does a better lifestyle that college purports, or even a good quality high school education gives us, if we don't allow our minds to take over? So I urge all of you to take a look at a long term chart of the performance of the stock market. Look at it. and ask yourself, when during that period would you have not wanted to be in stocks? Well, some of you will identify right away the period from roughly 2000 to 2010 being a period in the market when things were flat. The bottom line is no, there wasn't much money made during that 10-year period. Over the 10-year period, there wasn't money lost either. But when you lengthen that out to 20 years, all of a sudden you become very, very pleased that you made those investments. And that's true going all the way back to prior to the Great Depression. In order to be a successful investor, you have to let your mind work as it's designed to work. And frankly, if you can't make your own mind do it, I'm kidding, of course, go to ChatGPT or one of the other chatbots. They'll tell you what you should do rationally and what the results could have been. So I'm urging all of you to commit, stay the course, understand that you may be wrong for a while. But if you commit to the longer term, you're very likely to achieve financial rewards, financial success, and all the things that can do for you and your family, your charities, and everything you find important, truly important in life. You'll be able to do that much more and have a much happier life. Thank you very much. I'm glad you listened to this. I'm Tom Curran.